Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. So what I'd like to do today is I would like to read you what I thought was an interesting comment on a recent video that I made. It's crazy how the modern day equivalent to rebinding your own books could end up killing you. It's better to let us burn them and sell you a new one. Could persist without backlash for so long. It's good to hear things are moving in the right direction. And I wanted to make it clear that this fight for the ability to repair things has been a fight that's been going on for a really long time. He brought up the example of books, so I brought up a case that I remember preparing for a debate that I did 2 or 3 years ago, where I cited this particular case. This case is Doan versus American Book Company, because they were rebinding books and then selling these used books to people that wanted to pay less money than they would have been paying for a new book to get a used book. These were school books, and I'm going to take a wild guess that the whole meme of college textbooks and school books being overpriced is not just a modern phenomena. This seems to be something that's been as old as time. And I will leave a link to this down below for anybody who is interested in following along. A dealer who purchases secondhand school books, cleans, trims, and rebinds the same using covers in exact imitation of the originals, and places them in the market to be sold in competition with those of the publisher, although at a reduced price, is guilty of unfair competition, where, by reason of their new appearance, they are likely to be purchased by children in the belief that they are new books, and the product of the original publisher, including the cover and binding, and a court may properly require a notice to be plainly stamped upon the cover sufficient to prevent such deception. So they are selling used books, but since they fixed them up, it looks like a new book. So imagine if you are a car shop and you have a car that has been beat up, you replaced the bumper, you painted and everything. Now it looks too good. People may think that it's new. So you have to put a stamp on it that says that it is used. Now, I can understand people saying there should be a section for used books versus new, and I most certainly understand the concept that if you are going to sell something that you really, even if you are fixing it up, you should be honest and say it is used versus new. The problem with this is that in this case, they went a little bit overboard and stopped them from selling any of this stuff at all. So if you scroll down, and I'm not going to read the entire thing because this is legalese that will put me to sleep. I will not be able to read the entire thing, even if I try. So I'm going to abbreviate here. Upon the hearing of motion for preliminary injunction by the court, by its order, found that all the material allegations of said bill are true and ordered as follows. It is therefore ordered and decreed by the court that George Doan and Hart Hansen, their associates, are restrained by further order of the court, that a writ of injunction issue enjoining them until the further order of this court from binding or rebinding any copies, second-hand or new, of spelling book, arithmetic book, a geography book, Eclectic Complete Geography book, published by American Book Company. Any covers or cover designs having thereon the name of the complainant, the American Book Company, or the cut description. And here's the thing, so as long as it has their name, they can't resell it after having repaired it. So imagine if you replaced the bumper, the brakes, and the transmission on a Ford F-150. If you had to take the Ford logo and the F-150 insignia off of it in order to be able to resell it, because somebody may mistake that as having come from Ford directly. The above is not intended to prevent the repairing of secondhand copies of school books by rebinding the same and in with the original genuine covers manufactured by American Book Company. So you can fix it if you're using the genuine cover, but if you, again, this is, you can fix your Ford F-150 if you use, the brakes provided by Ford, but if not, take the logo. This stuff is insane to me. And they filed an appeal, and the appeal was had an interesting opinion at the end of it. So I will get to the appeal now. Coming now to the merits of the order, we are satisfied that there is here no infringement of the right accruing to the appellee under the copyright laws of the United States. The books which are the subject of controversy are copyrighted books which were printed, published, and sold by American Book Company. The sale of them by the appellee carried with it the ordinary incidents of ownership in personal property, including the right of alienation, and the appellants purchasing them had the right to resell them. Yes, the monopoly of the statute with regard to copies sold by the appellee was gone upon their sale. It is urged, however, that the sale passed the right to the particular thing sold and did not carry with it the right of repair or renewal. We cannot yield assent to the proposition in broad terms in which it is couched. The question is analogous to that of repair of a patented machine which has been sold by a patentee, touching with the Supreme Court in the Chaffee versus Belton Co. It is unnecessary, as we think, to consider the limitations of that right. We think that the right of repair with respect to a copyrighted book sold, to the extent to which that right here is claimed, may not properly be denied. These books had been in use by school children. Some were written upon and defaced. Some were soiled and torn. The covers of some were wholly or partially destroyed, and the binding had become imperfect. To render these books serviceable for use or sale, it became necessary to clean them, to trim the edges of the leaves, and to rebind them. We think that, so far as respects the copyright laws of the United States, no legal right of the appellee was invaded by doing so. What was done was merely the restoration of the books to their original condition when sold by the appellee, or so nearly as could be done. If it may be assumed that the copyright of the book comprehends the cover and the title of the book, as well as its text and illustrations, a proposition to which we are not to be held as assenting, it would be intolerable and odious to hold that a purchaser from the owner of the copyright of a set of books could not restore the binding of one of them in exact imitation of the original and of the other volumes of the set, and that in rebinding the one volume lie must differentiate its binding from the bindings of the others. A right of ownership in the book carries with it and includes the right to maintain the book as nearly as possible in its original condition, so far at least as the cover and binding of the book is concerned. Under the claim of unfair competition in trade, a different question is presented. The American Book Company has attained to a high reputation with respect to its school books. The reputation goes not only to the text of the book, but to the quality of the book itself, the character of the print, the quality of the paper, the binding, and the cover. The latter is of a unique design, catching the eye and identifying the book as the product of the American Book Company. These books are purchased at retail, as appears from this record, by children of 5 to 15 years of age. They come to know the books rather by the pictures presented upon the cover than by the text, for they are uninformed as to the text, and purchase them to study the text. The sale of these books is large, amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. It is the duty of a court of equity to protect these children from imposition. It is likewise the duty of the court of equity to protect the American Book Company from any unlawful interference with its trade. As we have said, the appellants have a right to rebind the books which they have purchased and to recover them, and, as we think, in exact imitation of the original covers, and with the name of the American Book Company upon the cover and up as upon the title page, as originally placed there by the appellee, and to sell such books. But the rebinding and the recovering are not the work of the American Book Company, and they should not be held out to the world as responsible for such rebinding or recovering of the books, nor, as we think, should children of tender age, who constitute a large class of purchasers of such books, be subjected to the possibility of imposition by a sale of them by the retail dealer as a new book, rendered possible by the newness of the cover. While, therefore, we hold that the appellants have the right to rebind and recover these books in exact similitude of originals, amounting to a mere repair of them, and have a right to sell the books so rebound, we are of opinion that the books so rebound and recovered and offered for sale should have prominently displayed and stamped upon its cover in clear and unmistakable language notice that the book was a second-hand book, rebound or recovered, as the fact may be, by the appellants, so that the appellee, not issuing second-hand books, shall not be chargeable in public estimation with the character of the binding or of the cover, or with the palming off upon purchasers' second-hand books, and as for new books. In this way, and in this way only, as we conceive, that can the vested rights of the property of both parties be respected, and the right of the public be subserved. The injunction complained of was therefore too broad. It prohibited the rebinding or recovering of the books in any covers or cover designs having thereon the name of the American Book Company, or having thereon the cut described and known as the galley cut, or having thereon any reproductions, simulation, or imitation of whole or substantial part. TLDR. Originally, what happened is they said, somebody is selling our used books after fixing them up and making them look nice, and they are selling these used books that now look new for a lower price than ours. That's wrong. The court said, okay, they can't sell used books that they have fixed up at all, which is, in my opinion, insane. The idea that you cannot sell something that you fixed up to look good is crazy. And upon appeal, that's what they found. They found that you're allowed to fix something and you're allowed to sell that fixed thing. You have to say that what you fixed is used. You can't say that it's new, but you can sell a fixed thing. This is reminiscent of an argument that I dealt with 8 years ago when I went to the New York State Legislature to talk about right to repair, and I talk about it in the 17-minute video that I did here where I talked to an assemblyman, and they told me that when I take a MacBook motherboard and I run a jumper wire on it, or I replace a chip, or I replace a Panasonic fuse with a Bourne's fuse, or a Bourne's fuse with a Nichicon or whatever, that I'm taking this MacBook and turning it into a PC. But since I'm not telling my customer that their MacBook is being converted to a PC, since I'm telling my customer that it's still a MacBook and representing it as if it's still a MacBook, I am committing fraud. So right to repair is bad because it pushes fraud, which is, like, there are so many reasons that this is complete and utter BS that I'm not going to get into in this video, because most of the people watching probably already understand that that's nonsense, that when I replace a component on a MacBook board, I'm not converting it to a PC and committing fraud by letting my customer think that what they still own is a MacBook. But this is a fight that's been going on for over 100 years. And, 120 years ago, there was that injunction put, but it was very quickly overturned, and you were allowed to sell it. Again, as long as you said it was used or refurbished, you're more than allowed to sell that product. You cannot tell somebody that they're not allowed to fix something just because it still has the Apple logo or it still has the Ford logo on it, because that's insane. And this is something that you're actually seeing us lose on in modern times. This is an interview I did with John Bumstead, a refurbisher, 5 years ago, when he used to sell refurbished items on Amazon. He had great feedback, great business reviews, great rating and everything, and he was no longer allowed to sell these items on Amazon, which is one of the most dominant marketplaces in our time, because Apple had made a deal with Amazon, and part of that deal, they don't want third parties selling refurbished items on the platform. eBay is starting to follow their lead by destroying the refurbished marketplace. Again, somebody like me 10 years ago could refurbish something and sell it on eBay as refurbished. Now, if you try to sell certain items as refurbished on eBay, you're no longer allowed to unless you're authorized by the manufacturer. And again, this is not a case for the law. They're not saying that you can't sell anywhere. They're just saying that you can't sell on these private platforms that just so happen to be where most e-commerce is actually done now, because they've completely destroyed the landscape for everybody else through that monopoly power. This is where we are now. It is much more difficult to enforce something like this now when you're dealing with private platforms. But philosophically, we are moving in this direction, which is, hey, you're not allowed to fix my stuff and resell it. Can you imagine if Apple were around 120 years ago? When they were trying to rebind the book, you would have to use their tool to do it, or the book would self-destruct. I mean, really, now we're dealing with laptops where when you try to replace the sleep sensor won't work unless you use proprietary software from the manufacturer in order to allow it to work again. We have devices where the manufacturer has to come out and plug their computer into it to clear an error code, even though you've done the repair perfectly, and the device has fully capable of acknowledging that you've done that repair perfectly. The dealer has to come out and plug his computer in order to fix that, which we're trying to fix with this bill we're trying to get passed in Colorado for right to repair there. Imagine what the world would have been like if companies that had this level of greed, that wanted to exert this level of control over the marketplace, had access to the technology they did today. Maybe you wouldn't be able to rebind your own book. Maybe you'd try to rebind your own book and the pages would auto-erase or something like that. I'm laughing, but I'm being serious here, because everything that I'm going over on this channel, all the anti-repair steps that these companies have taken, whether hardware locks, software locks, or everything else that are being done, this is stuff that they probably would have done 120 years ago if they had the ability to. They just didn't have the ability. They would have done it if they could, but they didn't have the technology to, and the courts smacked it down. And if we don't speak up about it right now, we may wind up living in a future where nothing is fixable, and you don't have the right to fix something and resell it. You can't fix your Ford F-150 and resell it because it has a Ford logo on it, and somebody may think that that repair was done by Ford. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something. Just wanted to get across. This is not a fight that's new. This is a fight that's been going on for a very long time, and it's on all of us to make sure that with each generation, we retain our sovereignty, we retain our rights to ownership, and we retain our rights to do what we wish with what we own. And that includes being able to fix what we own and resell it if we see fit.